Hi, advanced kids. Today we're going to talk about doing JavaScript to create an accordion or kind of a drop-down effect for our divs. So let's take a look at your simple site 2. This is mine right here. And I have 3 divs with some pictures and some text. And what we're going to do is we are going to create sections of our divs where we can click on them, and once we click on them, it creates like an accordion or drop-down effect. So what we're looking for is we are going to use a button tag or element. We're also going to rename our divs so that way they are consistent. So we might have to actually change our divs to be similar in size and shape. And we're also going to create a JS file for JavaScript. So let's get started here. Go to your HTML file, and mine's right up here, simple too. And what we're going to do is we're going to start out by creating a button for our sections. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'm going to do that for every div that I have. So here we go. Under Miss Bauman's site, I'm going to put a button element. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see. So under my name, I have button. That's my tag. And instead of using an ID, I'm going to use a class. And classes are used when you have multiple sections that are going to be called the same thing within a web page. So an ID is more unique, and a class is something where it is unique, but it's going to be used multiple times. So we use a class equals, and I'm going to call this accordion. Oops, I didn't spell accordion right. Accordion. And I'm just, for now, going to say section 1, and then a backslash button. I save and refresh. You'll see a button 1 or section 1 button is created. And we're going to go ahead and do that for every section or div, or right above every div that we have. So I have a second div here, and I'm going to create button class equals, and it's going to be the same name as the class above, accordion. Make sure you spell it correctly. And I'm going to call this section 2 backslash button. And then I'm going to go ahead and do that for the third one, right above the third div. So button class equals accordion. Section 3. And we can go back and change these names if we want later. All right, so let's save and refresh. We should have 3 buttons. Perfect. Right now our buttons aren't doing anything, but they are available, or they are sitting there. See, I can click on them. Nothing happens though when I click, but our buttons are in fact there. So let's go ahead and change our buttons in our CSS. So that way they have a better appearance than just this ugly little clicky button thing. And so I'm going to go to my CSS, and I'm going to create an accordion, if you will, accordion section. So I'm going to go ahead and do that after my title here, above my box 1. And because it's a class, instead of using a hashtag, which we normally use for an ID, we're going to use a period or a dot. And it's going to be called accordion. So it's basically going to apply to all our class names called accordion. Curly bracket. And I want to make this maybe the same color as otters or as all my divs that I have. So I'm going to have a background color. And my color is RGBA. And that's just a color combination. Instead of the hex code, it's the color combination with red, green and blue. Okay, so it's 230, 247, 255, and I want opacity, meaning so it's clear, to be 0.7, see through. Okay, so save and let's refresh to see. And you notice it does make it opaque. It does make it the same color as my box 1, 2, and 3. So I'm going to go back to my accordion and I want to try to make it as long or as big as the sections for otters. And it might be a little bit different. In fact, I'll probably have it go all the way across the screen. So for this, I also want to make a width of 100%. And a height, maybe like 100 pixels. I want it to be center. If it's 100%, it'll go all the way across. I don't need margin left or margin right. I don't want a border, so I might just say border none. And I want there to, at some point, be some type of transition. So I'm going to put that in right now, transition. And it's going to be 0.4s. So when I click on this, it's going to transition a little bit for me. So save and refresh. And there's my section. So you notice it goes the whole span of the page. Maybe if you don't want it to be that way, you could make it 500 pics. Okay. And then you might also have to set margin left, margin right. I don't know if it's going to let us do that. So let's just try it. Auto. Sometimes with buttons, they don't let us center them. Yeah, see, it's not going to let us do that. So for this example, let's go ahead and just make them the width to be 100% of the browser, just for this example. There we go. And it'll be 100%. Perfect. Okay, so that's my sections 1, 2, and 3. And what I would next want to do is I want to try to get these divs that I have that are below my sections, I want to try to get them to hide underneath the section or the button that we created. So remember, accordion is a button, and our divs now are going to be panels or sections. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go right back up to my HTML file, and wherever I have my divs and I name them a div ID, I'm actually going to change the ID to a class. And instead of calling it box 1, I'm going to call it panel. Same goes with box 2. I'm going to make that div ID into a div class equals, and I'm going to make it a panel. And then same with the third box. Make it a div class equals panel. And we're going to save. And if I refresh, it's not going to change much. The only thing is it's going to get rid of my divs because I'm not calling upon my CSS box 1, box 2, box 3. But we are now going to create a section in our CSS called panel. So I'm going to do that right after accordion. So it's a class, so I need a period or a dot. And I'm going to say panel. And I'm going to make that panel into something or give some styling to it. Padding. I'm going to have 0, 18, x. I'm going to have the text to align center. Center. I'm also going to have a background color the same as I had in my box 1, 2, and 3. So background color, RGB. You could have pink, you could have a hex code instead of the RGBA. It's totally up to you. 247, 255, opacity. I'm going to make it the same as those boxes, 0.7. I'm also going to have font size. I'm going to make it 15 pixels. And this is something new. So I'm going to make it a max height of 0 right now. So it's going to hide basically underneath those buttons called section 1, 2, and 3. So the max height is going to be 0 for right now. And then overflow is going to be hidden. So if there's anything hidden or overflowing, it's going to be hiding behind. And there's going to be a transition. So when I click on this section, that's going to transition down and the max height. So transition, max height, 2 seconds, and it's going to ease out, which means it's going to come down. And we'll play around with that once we get it totally working. Okay, so I now have a panel, which is what my boxes or my divs were. And it has some padding, text align, background, and it's going to have a max height of 0. Let's get rid of that max height just to show you everything else. So if I refresh, you'll notice that the sections now become the color that I want. My text is aligned, my text align is centered. Font 15. The transition you're not going to find right now quite yet because we haven't animated it. And if I now put max height back where I had it, max height is going to be 0. It will hide. Kind of hide behind is what it's doing, or making it so there's no, it's 0 pixels right now as far as how it's displayed currently. And we're going to call upon panel in our JavaScript so that way it transitions down. So it's not necessarily gone. It's just programming it so that starts at 0 pixels, and then we're going to make that section larger once we get to our JS file. Okay, so that's our panel, and that's our accordion in our CSS. And that's basically the styling of how it looks. Next, we want to talk about if we hover. So if I put my mouse or cursor above section 1, 2, or 3, what is it going to look like? So let's go ahead. It's going to be our CSS, and I'm going to put it right after panel, and I might have dot active. When something is active, or I click on it, it's going to do something, and it's going to do something to that section or that button called dot accordion. And it's when I hover over that, I'm going to have it do something. I could have it, the background for now, change to the color pink. So that way I just know it's working. We can always change that to something else later. All right, save, refresh. Now when I hover, it turns to pink. Okay. But as you can see, when I click on it, nothing changes quite yet. And that's where our JavaScript comes in. So again, to recap, we changed our div IDs to div classes. We changed our button, or we made our button into a class called accordion. And we've made our div classes called panel. We've made it so that it starts out with a max height of 0. And we're going to make that bigger, that section bigger, when we start calling upon our JavaScript. All right, so let's go to our HTML. And let's do our scripting. So we're going to put our script at the bottom. Script equals, and it's going to be a source, so src equals, and I'm going to create a JavaScript, so simple.js. I'm going to make that, and then that's just script for that closing tag. Okay, save. And then now let's open up a new file. So I'm going to go to my text edit, go to File, New, and this is going to be my simple.js. So this is my JavaScript. So in my JavaScript, I have to declare a variable. So var, I'm declaring a variable. And I'm going to call it ACC because it's going to be with my accordion class for my buttons. And I'm going to say it is going to assign it to the document .get element by class name. So you'll notice that we're using get element by class name. You'll notice it uses like the camel notation. So E is capitalized, B is capitalized, C is capitalized, and N is capitalized. And we're going to get that element by class name called accordion. So make sure you're spelling accordion correctly. And then you'll need a semicolon. So what this is saying is, I'm going to comment actually above it. This is grabbing the button, if you will, called accordion, and assigning it to the variable, ACC. So that's what that is doing. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so that's what that line is doing. Next, I'm going to declare another variable, var, and I'm just going to call it I, because this is going to be helping us count. So this is declaring a variable called I. And what we're going to do is we're going to need to create some type of count. So that way our program, our JS or our JavaScript, knows how many sections there are. And that's what the variable I is for. So in order to create a count, and this is something new, we're going to use a for loop. And this is where computer programming comes into play. So I'm going to make a comment. We need to create a count, meaning it's going to count how many sections we have, of how many sections we have in our HTML. To do that, we will need to use a for loop to help us count. Okay, so this is what a for loop looks like. I'm going to use the word for, opening paren, and I'm going to call in that variable I, and it's going to start at 0. So equals 0, semicolon. Then in the same line, you're going to have I is less than our variable for all of our sections called accordion. So ACC dot length, semicolon, I plus plus. Okay, so this for loop is basically saying we're starting at 0 and we're going to go to however many sections of accordion we have. So if we have 3 sections, it's going to start 0, 1, 2, and stop at 2, which means we have 3 sections because it starts at 0 and it goes till it's less than the number of accordions or sections we have, which is 3. It goes 0, 1, 2, which gives us 3 sections. And the I++ just means we're looping through so that we're adding, so we're counting every single time we loop through. So when it goes to 0, we're going to do something inside our for loop. And then when we go to 1, it's going to add to that. And we're going to do something and then 2, it's going to add something. As long as I becomes less than the length of our accordion, which means the number of accordions we have in our HTML file. So in our for loop, we have this count, and that's what this is. It's counting however many sections we have. And then we're going to do some kind of action. So inside this, we're going to call upon our accordion by using our variable ACC, and we're going to create an array, which is kind of just a storage area. So we're going to use the square brackets with the I inside that add all lowercase event listener. Opening paren, in quotation marks, you're going to put the word click, closing quotation marks, and a comma. So what this is saying is that for whenever I have the accordion variable, for whichever location it's at, so it might be the first location, which would be 0. It might be the second location, which would be 1. It might be the third location, which is 2. So whatever section I'm accessing, this is just telling me what section I'm looking at. I'm going to wait and listen for a click. So it's waiting for the user to click on one of the sections. And once it clicks, it's going to call upon a function. So we're going to create a function, opening, closing parentheses. And after that, we're going to create our function. So it's waiting for a click. And once it clicks, it's going to call upon a function. So we need the word function, opening, closing parenthesis, opening curly bracket. In this section is our function that will do something. So in this function, we are going to find out which section is active. So I need this, word this, dot class list, dot toggle, opening paren, active. So we're trying to find out which sections are active or being hovered or clicked on. Semicolon. Once we determine that, we are going to create a variable called panel. And that variable is going to be assigned the next element. So this dot next element. And it's not just the next element, but the sibling. So the thing underneath it. So sibling. And that is unique to JavaScript. Semicolon. And now that we've found the next sibling that we call panel, we're now going to do some comparisons. So if the panel dot style dot max height it's going to return. So if it's at the max amount of height, great. It's just going to return what we call a null set. So it's just going to return kind of nothing. So panel.style.max height equals null. Closing curly bracket. Else, so if it returns a max height that's already at the max height, it's just going to return an empty set. But if it doesn't, or if it's not at its max height, that's where the else comes in. We are going to do the panel style, panel.style.max height, and we're going to make that so it's the scroll height. So it's the height of the information that we have in there. So panel.scroll height plus the pixels that it's going to be. All right, so we're going to close that else statement out with a closing curly bracket. We're going to close out the function with another closing curly bracket. We're going to close out the add event listener with a closing parenthesis and then a semicolon. And we're going to close out this entire for loop with a closing curly bracket. So I'm going to just closes out the for loop. Closes out a function and the add event listener. And that one closes out the all right, so I'm going to save and I'm going to find my folder here. And I'm going to call this simple.js. All right. So fingers crossed that it all worked. I'm going to save. I saved my simple.js. Here's my site CSS, and here's my simple2.html. And I'm going to refresh. Okay, so I refreshed here, and you'll notice it's not working. And I'm guessing that it has something to do with my JS file because it's not animating or it's not moving. So I'm going to go back through and I'm going to double check my work. So I have VARs, I have declared my variable ACC, and it looks like get element by class name. It looks like I forgot an S in get elements. So it's a plural. So make sure you have get elements by class name. I'm going to hope that's the problem. That was the problem. So I'm going to save. And I'm going to refresh. And I'm going to click. Yep, there's the problem. So if I click on this, here we go. If I click on that, it comes up. And then if I click on it again, it disappears. So that's our goal, to try to get our sections to animate. So like I said, if we want to change our section names, we can go ahead and do that. Or sorry, our button names. Right now I have section 1, 2, and 3. Maybe you have, instead of section 1, maybe you have about otters. And maybe here, instead of section 2, you have where they live. And section 3, instead of that, I might have save and refresh. And now you can have it drop down. You notice our sections take up the whole page, and that's fine. At least for this example, we'll have them do that. And so that way it jellos or grows with the page size. The next assignment, we'll talk about how to get them to be a certain size, but I just wanted to show you guys how that we can animate using JavaScript, using things like add event listener, which makes us wait for it to be clicked. This talks about if we wanted more sections, we use this coding so that way we don't have to specify how many sections we have in our JavaScript. This allows us to create more sections without having to change the number in our JavaScript code. So if we had more sections, this would just expand to the length of, or to the amount of, if you will, how many sections we have. And that's how it knows when it uses the word length. It just knows that that's how many sections called accordion we have. And then we use the function where it listens for things to be active. So in our CSS, how we had that dot active, or that correlated with you hovering over and clicking on the button or section. It also talks about having a panel and the next element sibling. So it's the thing that's kind of underneath, and then checking the height. And if that's at its max height, it's going to return an empty set. And if it's not, then it's going to make it so it's larger. And the panel will scroll down, or the panel will make itself big enough for that information. So that is our JavaScript, something new. And we're going to be using concepts like this in the next few weeks. But this kind of gives us a introduction to using for loops, using add event listeners for clicking, and comparing some things called like max height for our section to give us some kind of animation for our sections.